Hey, I am so glad you are working with Texas BSM, and I want to share with you a couple of ideas about having vision-driven events on your campuses. And the first question I really want to address is, why is that important? Why do you need to have events that are vision-driven instead of just whatever feels good or whatever's popular or whatever is available? And the reason why we want to encourage you to have vision-driven events is because it helps you to be focused. And when you're focused, you can focus on the main thing that you're really trying to accomplish with your student leaders. It also helps you to make decisions about every other situation that comes up. And it's much easier to decide what you're going to do in your BSM if you're really, really clear about what the vision is. And so having vision-driven events, again, it's the reason that we want you to do that is because it'll keep you focused and it'll make every decision you're faced with during these first couple of years easier to decide. And I'll give you a couple of examples of BSMs that have real clear vision-driven events. At the University of Texas at Arlington, they do a weekly impact training, which is their gospel sharing training. And because the vision of the BSM is to engage lost students, they added this event a number of years ago, and the results even from this semester are that 40 students have given their life to Christ. Remaining focused on the vision of sharing the gospel with lost students has helped the UTA BSM decide this event is something that we need to highlight and we need to incorporate into our weekly events. Another example from my personal ministry is when I was at the University of Texas at Dallas, I decided that we would decide every decision from student leadership teams on to events based on our mission statement. Our mission statement at the time was that we existed to stretch students out into intentional relationships with the Father and with their friends, taking that from the scriptures in Matthew 22, where Jesus says the two most important things are that you love God and that you love your neighbor. And so we used that vision to drive everything we did. So for example, when I first got to UT Dallas, they were doing a weekly Bible study and a free lunch. And the vision seemed to indicate that we needed to do more to reach out to students that were not already coming to things. And so once we articulated that vision and said, based on this vision, we need to do some outreach, what does that look like? We were able to come up with a plan to have a weekly outreach table on campus where we gave away bottled waters or something else that allowed us to meet students we didn't already know. Well, what happens if you don't have a real clear vision and you don't make your events focus around that vision? So if there's not vision-driven events, what happens? One, I think there's no measures for success. You really never will know if your ministry is doing what we hope it will do because there will be no ruler for you to measure everything by. A second thing is, if you don't have clarity about having vision-driven events, is mistakes are easily made. At UT Dallas, we were in the middle of a noon lunch one day, right before spring break, and a student came through who was involved in BSM and involved in another student organization and just said, hey, our other organization's doing this, can we tell everybody about it? And without thinking about it, we just said yes. And the student was giving away these safe spring break kits with this other organization. And so he got up and he announced it and he told students about it, he handed them out. And after the luncheon, we realized that part of what was in the kit were condoms. And it just didn't seem to fit with the message we were trying to communicate to students about abstinence. And so because we didn't make that decision based out of our vision, we just made the decision based out of our relationship to the student, I feel like we made a bad decision. That's just one example. There could be others of what happens when you don't decide or have vision-driven events. How do you then get into the process of making your events vision-driven? One is, as you're beginning to plan things for the year, ask yourself, how does this event fit into our vision and what we're trying to accomplish here about reaching lost students? How could I make it fit, right? So what adjustments do I need to make? The students want to hang out together. Well, we don't want to just have community, we want to have Christian community. So how do we make that happen in the context of our fellowships, for example? Another thing is, I think you have to plan ahead with purpose. When you're thinking about your free lunches for the semester, you want to think about what speakers you want to invite to come, and what do you want to say to your speakers about what you're trying to accomplish, so that every noon lunch fits into your vision, instead of just being this haphazard, whatever the speaker feels like talking about that week. That's another way that you can ensure that you're having vision-driven events. The last thing I want to share with you is just a couple of words of encouragement. If you're trying to figure out how to move your events more into this idea of being vision-driven, could you, for example, spend some time looking at the model of Jesus Christ and how he made decisions about where to go and what to do? What were some key factors in his decision-making process that you want to include in your decision-making process as well? We've provided for you in our playbook a worksheet on developing your own vision if you don't already have one that's clearly articulated, and I would just encourage you to work your way through the points in that worksheet. And then finally, some resources that would be helpful. Alan Hirsch has talked a lot about this idea in some of his books, The Forgotten Ways, for example. And so you could very simply just do a Google search for some videos where he's spoken on this topic, or order a copy of one of his books and read through what he says about vision-driven events, and then begin to put that into practice in your ministry. Our hope is that everything you do falls into the vision of Baptist Student Ministry and Baptist Student Ministry in your particular cultural context. I had a new worker recently call me and say, I want to do this event where students get really good Bible teaching and really good worship every week. And as we talked about it, what we came to realize is the BSM didn't need to do that because the local church already was. But we reminded him of the vision of reaching lost students on campus. And so he shifted his thinking in terms of what activities and events they needed to do every week on campus to fit into that vision of reaching lost students. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is beth.smith@texasbaptist.org. Thanks. Have a great year.